Chapter 4, Christina's Ghost, a warning from the attic. The telephone was ringing when Chris came downstairs the next morning. Uncle Ralph was still in his room. "Chrissy, is that you?" Mrs. Cooper's voice was warm and anxious. She might have been there in the gloomy hallway instead of 1,000 miles away in Alaska. "Mom?" The word came out in a little gasp. "Are you all right, sweetie?" "We had a terrible time getting your number. I called Aunt Grace first, and she finally found it in Grandma's phone book. Uncle Ralph must have sent it to her when he found out where he was going to be for the summer. We were so sorry to hear about Grandma's surgery." Chris cleared her throat. She's doing okay, I guess. That's what Aunt Grace said. "And how about you, dear? How are you and Uncle Ralph getting along? Are you staying in a nice place?" "It's fine." Yesterday in Grandma's front yard, Chris would have given anything in the world to be able to tell her parents just how miserable she was. Now that she had the chance to do it, the words wouldn't come. There was nothing they could do to help, way off in Alaska. And besides, she had something exciting to think about now. She had a mystery to solve. "Well, I'm glad. Daddy's very busy, but we're going to do some sightseeing too. It would certainly be a damper on our whole trip if we thought you and Jenny weren't having a good time." Uncle Ralph started down the stairs and stopped short when he saw Chris on the telephone. "It's my mom," Chris said. I guess you want to talk to her." He moved in very slow motion down the rest of the stairs. "I guess I do," he said. "Hello, Jean." He listened for a minute, screwing his face into funny grimaces. Chris knew her mother must be apologizing for burdening Ralph and Grace. Uncle Ralph would be thinking about how he and Aunt Grace had argued about who had to take which child. His lips were clamped shut, but he was probably wishing he could tell his sister to come home at once and look after her kids herself. When he spoke at last, his voice was tightly controlled. "We'll manage," he said. "Don't worry about it. Christina and I have had a talk, and we understand each other." He paused again. No, everything's all right. Do you want to speak to her again?" Chris took the phone and listened to her mother's beloved voice, edged now with concern. "Uncle Ralph sounds tense," she said. "I'm afraid you'll have to go your own way as much as possible, dear. Find something interesting to do, that's the answer. Find a project." Chris nodded into the phone. "I have one, Mom," she said. "Don't worry, I'm okay." She wished she could have told her mom about the little boy, but she didn't dare. Uncle Ralph was probably listening to every word she said. By the time they said goodbye, he had the table set for breakfast in the kitchen. Rain was falling in grain sheet around beyond the open back door, and the room was dim in spite of the overhead light. "I hope you don't expect eggs and bacon and that sort of thing for breakfast," Uncle Ralph said. He looked as if his mind were still on the telephone conversation. "Cereal's fine," Chris said. She pictured the farm breakfast she'd be having at her grandma's house. Pancakes, maybe, and bacon and warm syrup. Maggie would be under the table poking Chris's toe with her nose to remind her that someone down there was waiting for scraps. Uncle Ralph looked out at the rain and scowled. "With that going on, I don't suppose you can play outside today." "I wasn't going to play anyway," Chris retorted. I was going to explore. As long as it's raining, I'll explore the house." Uncle Ralph nodded. "Good. Just don't break anything." They were like strangers, stiff and polite. Well, Chris thought, that's just what we are, strangers. It's the way I told Aunt Grace it would be. He doesn't want to know me, and I don't want to know him. As soon as she'd finished her cereal and orange juice, Chris scooted back upstairs to her bedroom. She'd chosen it the night before. After opening several doors of rooms full of heavy furniture, thick musty carpets and velvet draperies. This room must have been the housekeeper's. It looked like a little home, with simple white painted furniture and a faded rag rug. Hurriedly, Chris smoothed her sheets and blanket and arranged the white spread with as few wrinkles as possible. The contents of her duffel bag were on the dresser top and floor. She gathered things in her arms and dumped them into the dresser drawers. There, she thought, let him come poking around. He'd see that she could be as neat as anybody else if she chose to be. So, She heard Uncle Ralph cross the foyer and go to his study. As soon as the door closed, she ran downstairs to the kitchen. The house keys were hanging on a hook next to the back door. The night before, Chris had discovered one locked door among those she tried. It might be nothing but a storage closet, she supposed, but then why lock it? A good explorer would find out. The locked room was next to her own. Chris shivered as she tried one key and then another. The hallway was chilly and damp. At last a key turned in the lock and the door swung open. She stepped into a room so different that it seemed part of another world. The floor was covered with a bright red carpet. Most of the furniture was maple and child-sized. Huge posters of real animals and of Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck covered the walls, except where floor-to-ceiling shelves were crowded with picture books, toy cars, and game boxes. It was a wonderfully happy room, the only happy room Chris had found. She tiptoed across the carpet to the little bed. The covers were neatly folded back, as if they were waiting for someone. The sheets in the pillowcases were yellowed with age. She went to the closet. A low rod held shorts and shirts and a shiny rain slicker. Chris pushed back some of the clothes and pulled out a blue, pale sailor suit. She stared at it, trembling, and then thrust it back in the rack. The sailor suit was what the little boy had been wearing last night, just like this one. Chris thought, and for a moment she let herself believe the impossible. This was that little boy's room. Long ago he'd lived in this house. He was still here, somewhere, watching. She slammed the closet door. It couldn't be true. She was getting things into a muddle, just as Uncle Ralph had said on their way to Grandma's house. She moved to the book and toy shelf. Most of the books and games were too babyish to interest her, but on the bottom shelf she discovered a stack of comic books, just as she liked. She picked up the top one and thumbed through it, looking for the jokes and riddles page. What did the monkey say when he caught his tail in the lawnmower? Her voice was loud in the silent room. Quickly, she turned the book upside down to find the answer at the bottom. It won't be long now, she giggled. A small sound like a sigh made her turn to the door. The little boy stood there, smiling, wistfully. Chris couldn't believe it. Where had he come from? How could he have gotten in without making a sound? She tried to say hello, but the word came out in a froggy croak. The little boy vanished. Chris darted to the door. "Come back, boy," she called. "You don't have to be afraid." She ran down the hall, stopping to open each closed door. The rooms were empty. At the end of the hall was a door she hadn't tried the night before. She ran to it now and threw it open. Stairs led upward to the attic shadows. A blast of icy cold air struck her as she mounted the first step. Go away. The words thundered around Chris. A terrible rush and a roar that was partly sound, partly frigid cold. She leaped back into the hall and slammed the door with all the strength. In the quiet that followed, she could hear her heart beating. She leaned against the door. At the other end of the hall, her bedroom door stood open, offering safety. But her legs wouldn't carry her there. What had just happened? She wondered numbly. What was there at the other side of the attic door? She felt as if she were drowning in that avalanche of sound and chilling wind. She took a shaky step. Then she raced to the stairs and down the front door, her feet pounding furiously. "What's all the racket?" Uncle Ralph shouted from his study, but she kept on running, letting the door slam behind her. "Go away," the voice from the attic had told her, and that was what she just wanted to do now. The trouble was, she realized when she reached the end of the pier, there was no place to hide when she stopped running.